The Titanic, the greatest ship ever known, making its first sails across the sea. Everybody's loaded up and waving their glad hands goodbye. Captain Smith at Howdy Machinery, all right?
Recently released an incredible three-dimensional scan of the shipwreck of the Titanic. I mean, look at it. It's absolutely amazing. Just one problem that I have with this whole thing. Where is the sideswipe damage that was supposedly to have occurred from that iceberg that sank the ship?
Okay, we're all familiar with the story of the Titanic, you know, how it struck an iceberg and sank. No one questions that. Indeed, no one even thinks to question that. Everybody just thinks it's, re ipsa loquitur. But is that really the case? Because now experts are showing pretty compelling evidence that it might not have hit an iceberg at all. 3D models of the wreck now don't show any damage where the iceberg supposedly struck. So anyway, I'm going to explore this possibility. And that's what it is, a possibility. When it comes to things like this, you never really know for sure. But all you can do is look at the evidence. So that's what we're going to look at, the evidence. Several experts on the Titanic now claim that new 3D images may prove that the vessel did not hit an iceberg. The boat famously sank in the Atlantic Ocean more than a century ago, and now new digital scans have been released that may reveal more information about the infamous crash. Parks Stevenson, who has extensively studied the ship, says there is evidence to suggest that the vessel did not hit an iceberg along its side, as the multiple Oscar-winning 1997 film suggests, with the first full-size 3D scan of the ship's wreckage being created. And look here, look at the cursor here. See along here, this is where the iceberg supposedly struck, right in here. And as you can see, there's nothing. There's that there, but that's not iceberg damage. Right along in here is where it supposedly hit, and you can't see it. So anyway, there are multiple explanations for this. Some pretty plausible, some kind of far out there, and I'm going to look at both of them just right now.
A complete 3D reconstruction of the shipwreck of the Titanic was released last week, and it reveals the ship like we've never seen it before. This 3D scan took over 200 hours of dive time to complete. It was assembled from more than 700,000 images, taken from every conceivable angle. Now, of course, the beginning portion of that iceberg damage will be concealed by the muddy bottom built up around the bow of the ship as it collided with the ocean floor at a speed of more than 30 miles per hour. That all makes sense, and it accounts for why we can't see the initial impact point of the iceberg. But here's my problem with the whole thing. According to witness statements, the hull breach extended along the starboard side of the ship, past Boiler Room 5 and Boiler Room 6. Plus, we can see the shading of the red oxide paint from the very bottom of the ship, right here. Combine those two facts, and in my mind, there can only be one conclusion. That iceberg did not scrape the side of the ship as we have been led to believe for over 100 years.
Now, the most plausible explanation for the whole thing doesn't require a lot of in-depth analysis because it's so simple and really kind of obvious. That being that the iceberg struck the bottom of the ship and caused it to go down, which would prevent anyone from being able to see the evidence from the wreckage because of all the debris and muck that's piled up around the ship, and simply because the ship is sitting right side on the bottom. However, there's a more interesting and tantalizing explanation that that I'm going to explore that may or may not be true, but still, it seems kind of remotely plausible to me. And it all revolves around the establishment of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, most people don't realize that the Federal Reserve Bank is a private bank owned by people. I've looked to try to discover who owns it. It's kind of a shadowy clique, but there are some people who own that bank who make a ton of money off us. The dollar bill that you carry in your pocket is not American money. It is an instrument of debt back to the Federal Reserve Bank. We borrow the money we spend, and then we pay it back with the very money that we borrowed in the first place. It's kind of a Ponzi scheme. It causes inflation and causes a whole lot of shit. But anyway, in 1912, this guy here, J.P. Morgan, who worked for the Rothschilds in England, he wanted to start a central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank. But there were some guys who didn't want to do that. John Jacob Astor, Asa Strauss, and Benjamin Guggenheim. And those three guys were all on the Titanic. It's said that they opposed the bank. I've also read experts who said that they didn't oppose the bank. But most people say that they opposed the bank. Now, Morgan owned the Titanic. He owned the company, the White Star Line, that ran the Titanic. And he was slated to be on the maiden voyage, but he backed out. Not only him, but some of his buddies, his cronies, backed out too. And so the ship sank, and those three guys died. And then the very next year, without anyone to oppose the Federal Reserve, it was established. They voted on it in Christmas Eve, 1913. There wasn't a quorum. It was not legal, but they did it anyway. And because of that, we got the Federal Reserve Bank. It's kind of an inspirational story, the story of Astor on the Titanic. He was the world's richest man. I guess you could call him the Elon Musk of the Gilded Age. And he had a chance to get on the lifeboat, but instead he relinquished his seat to a woman and her daughter. And he went down with the ship, which, was very honorable and inspirational. But you got to ask yourself, wouldn't the world have been better off if he had taken the seat on the boat? Powerful men, a lot of times they don't really think about the influence they have and the importance of their existence to the human race. And instead, he chose to do the good thing, the honorable thing, and because of that, we wound up fucked, all of us, more or less. But, okay, there were several passengers, though, that reported they heard explosions. They didn't hear a grinding or a scraping. They heard explosions. And I got this from an AI. I'm just going to read this off here. Several passengers and crew members on the Titanic reported hearing an explosion or a series of explosions before the ship sank. Some of these accounts include Lawrence Beasley, a second-class passenger, mentioned in his book The Loss of the SS Titanic that he heard two distinct explosions, with the second one being much louder than the first. Harold Bride, the wireless operator, claimed that he heard an explosion and then a rush of water into the ship's wireless room. Charles H. Lightoller, the second officer of the Titanic, stated that he heard an explosion and then a rush of water into the area he was located. Violet Jessup, a stewardess on the Titanic, also mentioned hearing an explosion. And then last but not least, the captain of the RMS Carpathia, which picked up survivors, was sent to rescue survivors, reported hearing an explosion while still some distance away from the Titanic. So here are all these people, and these are just some of them, who reported hearing explosions. I got this from an AI. I don't remember if I mentioned that already, but I got it from an AI. Who knows? But anyway, it's food for thought. There was an explosion, not a grinding scraping of an iceberg. Here's where it gets kind of outlandish and kind of creepy. Several passengers and crew members of the Titanic are reported to have claimed they saw a submarine or a periscope near the sinking ship. Some of these individuals include, and then most of them have already been mentioned. I'll go over again. Charles H. Lightoller. He said that he saw, he said he heard a noise that sounded like a propeller shortly before the ship sank. And he saw a periscope. Violet Jessup, the stewardess, stated that she saw a periscope and heard a noise that sounded like a propeller. Lawrence Beasley, the second-class passenger, he said he saw a periscope and a noise that sounded like a propeller. Harold Bride, the wireless operator, heard a noise that sounded like a propeller and saw a periscope. All these people, and these aren't all of them, but these four, and then the captain of the Titanic himself. The captain of the Titanic reportedly said that he saw a periscope or a submarine in the area. Now, are all these people stupid? Are all these people hallucinating? And like I said, these aren't the only people who reported such a thing. And why would they have said that? You know, there was the iceberg, because the iceberg was there. Why would they have said it? Why wouldn't they have just assumed that the boat hit an iceberg? That's the reasonable assumption and conclusion. But yet they said they saw a submarine. There were also several people that said that they saw a vessel shining a spotlight on the wreck and on the passengers in the water, and that it disappeared. So it's as if a submarine surfaced to look to see what they'd done and then went back under. And once again, are they all hallucinating? Are they stupid? Oh, but wait, they're not experts. But anyway, people discount that possibility because they just say, well, they say it was a German submarine. That's what they conclude baselessly. And they say, well, we weren't at war with Germany. They didn't sink the Titanic like they did the Lusitania a few years later because we weren't at war with them. Oh, my goodness. But ask yourself, and this is where conspiracy people miss a very big possibility. Does it have to be a German submarine? Does it even have to be a state actor? Huh? When you're dealing with people the likes of Morgan and the Rothschilds, don't you think that they could buy their own submarine and have their own private submarine? I just did a video on the secret space program, and you know, the possibility that there might be a secret space program that's funded privately might be the case. You know, and Elon Musk, he's doing a open space program, public space program, privately run. So, you know, guys like Morgan, they could have bought their own submarine. It's my personal conspiracy theory. And of course, you know, they wanted to get rid of Astor and those guys because they wanted to start the bank the next year. So anyway, that's, you know, it's kind of intriguing to think of that. You know, it's plausible. However, the most likely conclusion was that the iceberg struck the bottom of the ship. However, like I've said multiple times already, these people, they're not stupid. The people who reported that, they're not crazy. And they reported the same thing independently of one another. Huh? You know, you can get so deep into conspiracy shit that you see a conspiracy in everything, and there isn't a conspiracy in everything. However, this one seems kind of tantalizing, kind of intriguing. Or not.
Another theory that explained the explosion claimed that there was a German U-boat involved in the sinking of the Titanic. The Armenian writer was, in fact, not the only survivor who mentioned they heard explosion sounds coming from somewhere deep in the bowels of the ship. And they'd also claimed they'd seen a searchlight coming from some ship shortly after Titanic had sunk. It wasn't a vessel hurrying to the rescue, so it could have actually been a submarine that surfaced to see what it had done to the legendary ship.
This movie, I believe, was made as a brag. This movie, I believe, was made to show America exactly what the fuck happened. So the American worker was resistant to financial debt until the car. And so the Whore of Babylon in this movie seduces Leonardo DiCaprio. And when you look at the symbolism, it's like a demon whispering into the ear of an innocent man. Okay? Look at this. It's like a demon. You can see the image. So Henry Ford famously did not want any American to go into debt for a car. So look at the symbolism. That isn't love there. That's a demon whispering into the American worker's ear. Okay? He dreams of having this car for his ambitions, which were work-oriented, and then the Whore of Babylon fucks him. The Whore of Babylon seduces the American worker through the car industry. And in the movie, the cinematography, she's always depicted as red. That's why she has red hair. Her name is Rose. She wore a red dress. Okay, that's the Whore of Babylon. Now, once the American worker has accepted the offer of the Whore of Babylon to get into debt, the waters start to rise. As we all know, in the financial world, every metaphor has to do with water. Are you afloat? Are you underwater? Are your assets frozen? And then we see as the Whore of Babylon stares into the eyes of the American worker and lets him slip under the water. So he's no longer afloat. He is now underwater and he cannot pay off his debt. And that is the story of Titanic. Okay? So Titanic is the story of the Whore of Babylon coming to America from the aristocracy that she was fleeing because it was overregulated. The American worker, filled with life and dreams, got fucked in the car industry, okay? Accepted the debt, idolized the whore, drew her, made graven images of her. The water starts to rise, and he is now underwater. And now you find yourself in modern America.
Titanic, the greatest ship ever was known, making its first sails across the sea. Everybody's loaded up and waving their glad hands goodbye. Captain Smith says we're going to make a world record out of this ship. We're going to make it to New York about 2 days and a half or 3 days ahead of time. How's the machinery now? All right. How's the compass? All right.